Well, to help us wrap up President Cyril Ramaphosa's testimony at the State Capture Commission of Inquiry into allegations into state capture these past 2 days is Associate Professor at the Wits School of Governance, Professor William Gumede. Prof, thanks very much indeed for joining us. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, and also hi to you, viewers.
All right, so today was actually day 4 of President's giving evidence at the Commission of Inquiry. And I just wonder, looking at his overall testimony, his performance over the 2 sessions, what impressions have you been left with?
I think, the President tried hard, of course, to, accept the ANC, complicity of the ANC in corruption, while at the same hand trying to distance himself from the corruption itself. Because you must remember, after his testimony now, the Zondo Commission will now make some recommendations for prosecutions. So I think that is what he tried to do. And also, I think we tried also to respond to the fact that where was he? What did he do? Did he know about it? Why did he not raise his voice when he saw it? And so on.
Was he convincing, do you think? Do you think that he said as much as he knew or said as much as he could?
I don't think he was convincing at all. We needed much more information. We needed much more specifics. We needed to know, who was involved. Also importantly, the minutes of the meetings of the ANC's National Deployment Committee between 2012 and 2017 apparently disappeared, according to the President. Now, the deployment committees are very much responsible for some of the, for both the state capture and what we would call lack of state capacity. Because what the ANC's National Deployment Committee did, it appointed almost every senior person in government. It appointed, private companies linked to the ANC to deliver services. And often, the appointments that it's often made were often not competent people. Then it collapsed the state. That's why we don't see service delivery. The same with some of the companies that have been given state contracts to deliver services, and they are often approved by the deployment committee. And often they don't deliver. And even in some cases, the deployment committee even have made recommendations of who should be part of a black economic empowerment deal with a private company. Now, so it would have been really good for the president actually to, to tell us exactly, when and how, which were the companies involved, who were the individuals who were deployed. We heard about 1 or 2, but we needed to hear of more.
Is it believable that minutes can disappear? We live in the world of technology where dictaphones and recording equipment is there, and then you transcribe from recorded sessions. What do you reckon happened there?
My sense is they didn't want to have any minutes for people to. They didn't want anyone to know what kind of decisions were made, who were deployed. And because you must also remember the deployment committee would also remove people from certain positions. If they think that you may be too critical, of the ANC, of policies, or you are not malleable or pliable enough, they will remove you from government. And the sad thing is also, a big question is why have people stayed who were clearly incompetent and were clearly corrupt, stayed for such a long period in government, and why have no one been prosecuted from 2008 onwards to now?
Another issue that created quite a bit of excitement on social media, but I do think some of it might have been mischief, is the president talking about Brian Molefe getting his job at Eskom. Do you think that that changed the story in any way, changed the narrative in any way?
No, it didn't change the narrative, but I mean, also, it shows you, I mean, to recommend Prime Molefe, so clearly he was recommended by the ANC's deployment committee. But at that time, I mean, he was already under a cloud of corruption. He had dealings already at that time with the Gupta family. It was already in the public domain. It was already in the media. Civil society had already raised the points. And the deployment committee still appoint him. And I think those are the things that I think the public need to know more about. Why would a deployment committee appoint him or recommend him for appointment, and many others who were whether corrupt or incompetent, knowing that, if you appoint a corrupt individual or incompetent individual, they will collapse that any entity that they are in charge of, and then we will have unemployment, we will have lack of service delivery. And so, the public, I don't think, the answer of the president was good enough at all.
All right. So other issues that have come up in the last 2 days is political leaders, their allegiance. Is it to the party or is it to government? Is it to the citizens? And, I say this with an eye on America and what's been happening there, the Republicans in particular, defending all sorts of things in the name of their party. We see it in Europe as well. So it's not an unusual thing, but is this something that's playing out here in South Africa where perhaps the party is the first priority?
Unfortunately, clearly from the president's testimony, but also from other ANC leaders, their testimony in front of the Zono Commission, that it appears that the ANC, for many ANC leaders, is their first priority. Now, in a democracy and according to the Constitution, if you're elected or if you're appointed to the public service, your first priority is not your political party, but your first priority is the country and the public interest of ordinary citizens. That's your priority. And I think that is why our democracy is failing. That is why many other democracies are failing, whether in Africa or in Western countries. The moment when elected officials or appointed officials govern in the interest of their own parties or in the interest of their own pockets, then it is when we see the service delivery failures, we see the unemployment, we see the corruption, and that is the moment where things go wrong.
Talking about the ANC, and we'll talk retrospectively, but also, I guess, to talk about the future. It seemed as if during this period under review that you have a group of people inside the party that are all powerful and that everybody falls into line. What's to say that that's not going to happen again, or are the dynamics different now?
Yes, no. The tragedy of it, it's a small group of people who've been running the ANC for the last decade. Just think about, the ANC have millions of supporters, millions of members. The same people every year after every election get reappointed. Small group are running. Most of them don't have the competency. Most of them don't even know I've never run anything before. And many of them don't have the ideas or the energy even or the political will. Yet they have been running the country. And unfortunately, that is going to happen again unless ordinary ANC members and ordinary voters begin to, during elections, to begin to vote for different parties or not to vote for individuals, at least, who are incompetent or who are corrupt. We're going to see it. And also, just from a historical point of view, no political party in Africa since the Second World War, since the end of independence, have ever changed while they're in power. Nobody has cleaned up the act while they're in power. Nobody has reformed or modernized. Nobody has moved. No party in Africa, and there's 54, 55 countries with political parties. None of them has ever, after they've been corrupt, ever changed. I cannot imagine that the ANC will have to go against history to change. The only way a political party in government can change if people don't vote for it anymore and it is in the opposition and it learns its lessons, it gets new leaders, new policies, and it asks for then asks for a new mandate. So I'm very skeptical because so far, from a historical point of view, no African independence or liberation movement has ever changed or cleaned while they were a governing party. The only parties that's changed in Cape Verde and Mauritius were parties once they've been kicked out of power and they've been in opposition and they had introspection and they elected new honest leaders and new policies and they had fresh blood, and that's when parties change.
All right, perhaps as a final question, the Commission of Inquiry in theory is wrapping up now. Do you think that it's equipped itself well and that at the end of this we'll have a pretty clear picture of what happened, and I guess all eyes will be on what they recommend going forward?
No process is perfect, but I think, the Commission has done what South Africans needed it to do. The Commission was almost like a truth commission on corruption. So no process is entirely perfect, but I think they've done their best. And I also think after this commission, no one could say they've never heard or they didn't know that there was corruption. And I think the most important thing for the commission now is going to be who they recommend for prosecution. Because if no one gets prosecuted after this commission, then it would have been a waste of money. So its success of the commission will ultimately depend on whether we're going to see prosecutions. And we know, the last couple of years, for the last 9 years or so, no one has been prosecuted, although we know there has been corruption.
All right. Well, let's see what happens in the coming months. But it's been fascinating chatting to you and unpacking, particularly the last 2 days of the President's testimony. Professor Gumede, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.